In this video, I'll show you how to build an AI-powered email agent. It can retrieve emails from your Gmail inbox using filters you specify, process the emails in a highly personalizable way, and give you a final report in your Telegram, Slack, or as a Google Calendar event. I'll show you how to set everything up step by step and how to adapt the workflow to your needs. All right, so with that said, let's get into it. Okay, so let's go first through how I want our workflow to kind of work and see what steps we need to do to accomplish the goal. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start the workflow once a day. So we have a trigger that goes once a day and starts our workflow automatically at the same time. But for testing purposes, we're also going to have a chat start for our workflow so that we can just run it on command whenever we feel like so that we can test it out. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the current date. We need that in order to see which emails we're going to need to include in our digest. We're also going to get the date 24 hours prior because we only want to retrieve a certain amount of emails. We don't want to retrieve all the emails that we had all the time, right? Only 24 hours prior. And then we want to get the digest date, and this is what we're going to calculate actually, and that's going to be the date and time at which the digest is going to be given to our user. Then we're going to go and retrieve the emails, and here we're going to have a few limitations. So for example, we're going to get a certain number of emails. We're not going to get all the emails that are in the 24 hours. You could personalize that if you like to, but for the purposes of this workflow, we're going to get, I think, only 10 emails, and we're going to build the digest from those. After that, we're going to use an LLM or ChatGPT in my case to create the digest. You can use whichever one you like. You can use Google Gemini, you can use Ollama on your own device, whichever one you like. For me, I'm going to use ChatGPT for this tutorial, and that's what we're going to use to create the actual digest from the emails that we retrieved. Now, here's where you actually can personalize your LLM to do what you like. So for example, in this workflow, I create a digest, but you can do some more analysis. You can have your LLM do whatever processing you need for your particular task, and I'll show you how to personalize it here as well. And then finally, we're going to inform the user in one way or another. So we can have multiple channels. We can use a Telegram, we can use Slack, or we can send an email with the digest. For this tutorial, I've chosen to create a calendar event because, for example, when you're starting out your day, you're looking at your calendar for the events of the day, you might want to see a small digest of what you can expect from your emails. So we're going to use a calendar event, but you can use a Telegram. And if you want to see how you can create your Telegram bot, go ahead and check out my video to see how you can set that up. All right, so we're going to move to our workflows in N8N. Now, again, a reminder, if you want to just download the workflow, you can get it from my community over at school.com/bottribe, or you can go step by step and build it with me in this video. And actually, you might learn a bit more building it step by step. So I'm here in N8N. If you don't have N8N, obviously go to n8n.io, create an account. It's free for 2 weeks. You can play around with it, or you can host it yourself. Again, I have a video on that. It's on YouTube, so go ahead and check that out as well if you're interested. But this is my N8N instance, and I'm going to create a new workflow here. All right, so let's get started. I have, first of all, we're going to have a trigger on a schedule, days, 1 day in between triggers, and we're going to run this, let's say, at 7 a.m. every day. All right, now let me just increase this a little bit so that hopefully you can see better. And then we're also going to have a chat trigger that will allow us to interact with this in a chat window for testing purposes. All right, so after the trigger, we're going to have a get date, a date and time node, and this is going to be get current date. This is standard default. We're going to keep it basic, and we're going to connect both triggers to our get date and time node. All right, after that, we're going to have a code node, and here is where we're going to calculate a few things. So we're going to just remove this JavaScript code and paste the code to calculate the date for 24 hours prior. Now you can just copy this code from my community, or you can just type it out as well. Both are good options. All right, so what this does is basically it creates the date from current date minus 24 hours. So let's go ahead and run this. let me just run the schedule trigger, and then we're going to run the date time. So now we have some input for our node, and then let me execute this step. So you can see we have current date that was given previously, and we have the calculated previous date UTC, and this is 24 hours prior. All right, so we have that code. Let me actually just rename this to get date 24 hours prior. Okay, and then we're going to have another code node, and this is going to be called get date 7:30 a.m. because this is going to be the date and time at which our digest will be created. Okay, so again, I have some code that I've generated, and I'm just going to paste it here. This is, yeah, basically it just gives us the date at 7:30 on the same day as the current date. Okay, so if I execute this step, we now get another current date digest. It's at 7:30 on the same day as current date. All right, so that's basically it for the foundations. Now we need to connect to Gmail, and this is going to require some credentials. So let's go here, and we have the Gmail, and we have get many messages Gmail node. So obviously you will need to connect to Gmail, but this is actually very simple. Now I have already credentials for my Gmail account, but of course you might not have them, so let's see how that works. So if you don't have that already, you need to go to console.cloud.google.com. You will also find this link in the description. If you don't have an account there, you need to create an account, and you need to connect with your Gmail account. Obviously, that will create the entire account on the Google Cloud platform, and then it's going to ask you to create a project. Okay, so I have my project here. It shows up on the upper left-hand side. Let me see if I can increase this a little bit. Okay, so N8N work, that's my project. You can create your own. Once you have that, you should see a page similar to this. The important bit is you need to open up the side panel here, and we need to go to API and services and go to library. Okay, now for library, we're going to need to enable two things for this particular project. So we're going to have Gmail, we're going to search Gmail here, and we have Gmail API. Now I have this enabled, but of course you need to enable that yourself. So that's the Gmail API that we're going to need. And then we're going to also need calendar. Okay, because we're going to create an event with the calendar API. So go ahead and enable that as well. Of course, I have that enabled. Okay, so once you have that enabled, we're going to go back to the navigation menu. Again, under API and services, we're going to go to credentials. Okay, so I have a few credentials here, but of course you need to create one. So we have here at the top, create credentials, and we're going to go for OAuth client ID. So create your OAuth client ID. We're going to select a web application, give your application a name. So for example, email digest app, the name doesn't really matter, but we need to add an authorized redirect URL. So here we're going to add a URL. We're going to go back to our workflow, and here we're going to create a new credential. And here we have our OAuth redirect URL. Click to copy and paste that in the box here, and then click create. So here is where you have the credential information. So we have the client ID. Let's go ahead and copy that, and let's go back here and paste it in the client ID. And of course, we're going to need the secret and paste that in. Now, once you do that, we're going to need to sign in with Google. Okay, so I have my email here, and click on that and click continue. And then I have already given access to this account. So you might see a few options to select here. Usually I select all options because that gives me the greatest flexibility. You can pick and choose which one you like, but for testing purposes, I recommend you select all options and then click continue. And then the connection should be successful. All right, now that's all for this screen. Let's rename this to something like Gmail credentials. Okay, and then keep editing. Let's make sure we save before we close this. So we have Gmail credentials here. Now we are in the get many messages node for our Gmail. Okay, so here we have Gmail credential, we have messages, get many. This is the limit of how many messages you want to retrieve on this request. I'm going to set this to 10 to make it a bit simpler. And then we need to add a filter. So we need to only select the messages that we have received after a certain date. And luckily, we've already prepared that date for us. Okay, so we have the option under filter, we have the option received after, and then we're going to copy or click and drag previous date UTC, click and drag it here, and that is fine. So let's just execute the step, and if everything works correctly, you should receive your emails. Now make sure you have some emails to receive. I've sent 2 emails just for testing purposes, so I have received those back. This is a test message, and then this is a test message. So I have 2 messages received. Okay, so you can see 2 items here. Now, we cannot simply pass these 2 messages to our AI agent because it will analyze them sequentially, okay? And we want to analyze them together and create a digest from the whole lot of emails. So that means we need to kind of aggregate and collate them together. The simplest way to do that is through code. So let's add another code node. Okay, and here we have a code that I've already prepared for us. Of course, you can find it on the community, or if you downloaded the workflow, you should already have it. But this basically collates all the messages and puts them in a single variable so that it's easier for the LLM to process them. Okay, so if I execute this step, you can see that I have a single variable here. If I go to schema, I have messages, and that's a single variable with multiple messages underneath, and we're going to pass this messages variable to our LLM. Okay, so now let's add an AI agent. I have my AI agent here. Instead of connected, we're going to define below, and we're going to click and drag the messages here. And here is where we can personalize our AI agent. So we have a system message, and you can pretty much have your AI agent do whatever you like. So I will say something like this. Let me just expand that a little bit. You will receive as input a list of emails that the user has received in the past 24 hours. Make a summary of the emails and present them to the user in the form of a daily digest. And I gave the structure for the digest. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need here. Let's add a chat model. And we're going to go down to OpenAI chat model and add the OpenAI. I'm using 4.1 mini for testing purposes. For production, you might want to choose a smarter model, or maybe you want another LLM. Now, for the credentials, obviously, you need to have OpenAI credentials. If you're going to use ChatGPT, you need to go to platform.openai.com. ChatGPT actually requires you to put down a deposit for to pay for your tokens, basically. But of course, if you're working with N8N and AI automation, you're always going to need tokens for that. So I encourage you to do that. If you want everything for free, you can either use Grok and create an account with them, or you can install Olama locally, and that is going to be free, but it will use up the resources on your local machine, on your local device. All right, so that's all for this. We have our AI chat model. I think that's good. We don't need to do anything else. So let's just go ahead and execute this step and see what that gives us. Okay, so we have our output, we have daily digest, and everything seems fine so far. So now all that's left for us to do is inform the user of the result. However, before we do that, we have a small problem. And the problem is that here we have many messages, okay? We don't have a single message, we have many. We have, in my case, up to 10. At the moment it's 2, but it can be up to 10, right? So once we pass this node, we have multiple lines of messages, multiple items. And if we want to use the date that we set previously, the system is not going to know which date is going to need to use, because the date is going to be duplicated or multiplicated, let's say, as many times as we have items here. So that means if we have, let's say, a calendar, Google Calendar, let's add this anyway, we're going to need it. So we're going to create an event. But if I want to create an event at start, which is not now, it's going to be get date 7:30, so date digest. We have a problem here, right? We say we find the error, can't determine which item to use. That's because we have multiple branches here, multiple items, so the system doesn't know which one to use. So to fix this, we're going to use a set fields or edit fields. And again, here we're going to do a bit of code trickery. So we're going to have, for example, digest date. And here for the value, we're going to have this code. Now, again, this is a bit of trickery because we could have, so let me just show you how we do that. We could have the get date at current date digest, but this doesn't really work because we have multiple elements. So instead, what we do is if we say, take the element 0, so that's the first element in the list, then you get the node get date 7:30 a.m., which is the name I've given to this node. Okay, you might have a different name if you don't have exactly the same one like I have renamed my node. You might need to change this a little bit, but if not, you need to set the exact name for the node here, and then we can get the .json.current date digest. Okay, so that should work fine. If I execute this, we're gonna have a digest date of whatever this is. So we're just taking multiple elements and converting them to a single first element here so that we can use this for our calendar. Okay, now if we go back to the calendar, and here we have our digest date, and we're going to create our start date. Okay, so digest date, and now it works fine and is going to be exactly the same digest date. Now we need a calendar. Now, of course, again, I already have credentials for the calendar, but if not, you need to create a new credential, Google Calendar account, go back to console.cloud.google.com. If you still have this window open, you can use the same credentials. However, I do recommend you create separate credentials for separate services. Okay, so let's go off of that and then create new credentials, OAuth client ID, exactly the same. And here you can give it a name, give it the URL. Okay, so you can give it this URL. It's exactly the same as the previous one, but just click and copy and paste it here, and then just create that new credential. It's the exact same process that we had previously. Copy or paste rather the client ID, client secret, and then connect with Google, and you should be fine. I'm going to use the existing credentials that I have because I don't want to duplicate that, and also it's a very straightforward process. Okay, so once you do that, you should be able to connect your calendar. It should show up as a list if you open this up. The last thing we need to do is we need to set some properties here. So let's open this up, and let's say all day, that's going to be an all day event. We're going to leave it at that. Let's add a a summary, and for the summary we're going to say something like daily email digest, and then the actual content is going to be somewhere here, description, and then we're going to go AI agent output, and then paste that description here, and that should be it. Okay, so let me try to execute this step, and it should work. So now if I go to calendar.google.com, I have my daily digest here, and I have the information in my calendar. And let me just delete that for now, and let's just run the workflow completely. So I have that done. Let's rename this to Gmail Daily Digest. Okay, and that's pretty much it. It is saved. So let me open chat and just simply say go. All right, so that seems to have worked, and I have another event here with my 2 test emails, and I have some estimated priority, high, and medium. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's how this works, and I really like this workflow because it shows us how we can interact with the Google API in 2 ways, both for email and calendar. So you can, of course, personalize this. You can change the AI agent to perform whatever task you need for those emails, and you could retrieve more emails or different dates and so on and so forth. You can personalize this in a number of ways. What I would do at the end, I would just disable this chat messages. Okay, so just disable it. Let this run every day at 7 a.m. and it's going to create our digest for 7:30. Save that. And then if you want to actually run it every day, you have to enable it. Don't show again, and then run it, and it will run automatically every day at 7 and give you a digest of those emails. All right, so that's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.